Hey guys, it is Monday, January 20th, 2025. It's been a weird stretch for me. As many of you know, I've been volunteering a lot I can't say over the past year. The past year would be like a couple of weeks. Last year, 2024, I spent most of the year volunteering in a Unitarian Universalist church, which, those of you who know me or know of me from my online speaking, you know that I'm an atheist. I'm not religious in any way. I don't hold any supernatural beliefs. So hearing that I was volunteering in a church, that I was attending a church, might sound a little bit weird to many of you. But the Unitarian church was actually compatible with my atheism. It was welcoming of it. Because while there is room for people of all faiths, there's also room for people of no faith. So for me, it was kind of a good fit. But I found myself in the last couple of weeks realizing that it's time for me not only to move on from the local organization, but also to part ways with the national organization, with the whole concept of Unitarian Universalism. You know, for a little bit of background, for most of my life, church was a huge part of who I am, big part of my identity. I was raised in a devoutly Christian family, and as a result, church was a central part of family life. It shaped my social life. That's where I found my purpose. All of the community that I interacted with was church related. I went to Sunday school with certain kids. Other people I knew, they were related in some way to my parents' friends who they had met in some way through church activities. I mean, it was church. I even went to Christian school in the church basement. So, I mean, this whole idea of church being a central part of life, I don't know how I could have avoided that. I mean, just by design, I belonged in a church environment. Even when I grew up and had kids of my own, church continued to be an important part of my life. And that was all up until I lose track of time so easily. I've been an atheist for so long. I really got to think about this one, but I think it was about 12-ish years ago, I deconverted from my Christian beliefs. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have access to church. And for several years after that, I felt like I was just drifting without a rudder. And sometime just before the pandemic, I learned about Unitarian Universalism, which seemed like a perfect solution to me. Because the UU Church welcomes people, as I mentioned before, of all faiths or no faith at all. They emphasize values like social justice, equality, and inclusion, which are all values that I share. And going there offered a sense of belonging, a place to serve the community and fill the gap on a Sunday morning by giving me a morning ritual that I think I'd been missing for a really, really long time. But over the course of time, I started noticing issues that were troubling to me. The organization seemed more focused on appearing good than actually being good, if that makes sense. And with the most recent congregation I was a member of, like leadership, especially the minister, was allowed to engage in abusive behavior in an environment that there was really no accountability, no checks and balances in place. And around her were a small group of influential members that continually resisted the changes that were needed for the church to evolve in healthy ways. Even when I reported that there was some transphobic bigotry coming from one of the members towards another one, it wasn't taken seriously, which bothered me because the church is supposed to be like largely about inclusion. I mean, we got rainbows painted on the building, for God's sake. But the church leadership failed to really stick to their own guidelines and the core values of the congregation that are spoken about so often. They seem to be disregarded. And when I eventually, I got to the point where I raised my concerns with the minister, her response was disappointing, to say the least. And it wasn't just concerns related to the bigotry, but there's other concerns that I had voiced as well. And without getting into the finer details, I mean, effectively, she quickly cut off communication and she initiated disciplinary action against me for quote unquote disruptive behavior. And even though I had followed the church's, what they call the covenant of right relations, which is basically like a series of guidelines as far as how you're supposed to interact with each other, how you're supposed to approach each other if there's an issue. In accordance with that, I tried resolving things directly with her, but because she had severed the communication and taken disciplinary action against me, the result of that was a temporary suspension, and every effort was made to keep me isolated and unsupported, which honestly I think was kind of like a shit move. And as I continued to see the leadership ignoring these issues, ignoring my experience, my respect for both the church and its leaders started to fade. Now, the individual church answers to a regulatory body who was made aware of the conflict. They decided to side with leadership instead of seeking a just outcome. And it became pretty clear that I was fighting a battle that I couldn't win. And so rather than continuing to fight, I decided to move on. Now, I spent a lot of time since then trying to think, okay, what does moving on mean? What about this is bothering me so much? I mean, I guess what bothered me the most is I don't like when my words and actions are misrepresented or misunderstood. I don't like when people tell stories about me that twist the truth. And I do like when there's a misunderstanding to have an opportunity to explain where I'm coming from. And if I've misstepped in some way, I do want an opportunity to own up to that and to take any steps necessary to fix things. But when people are determined to see me in a bad light, when people are determined to tell untrue stories about me, there's not really much I can do, at least directly within that situation. And I think that's why I struggled so hard. I mean, obviously I wanted to be understood. I wanted to be seen for the truest version of myself, not for whatever twisted picture that was conjured up by hurt people. But I came to the point where I was realizing that continuing to struggle with this was really draining me. It's not a good thing to be in a position where I'm constantly having to justify myself, where I'm constantly having to defend my intentions, where I'm constantly seeking validation from people who just aren't willing to offer it. It's tiring and it's unproductive. So I made a decision that I was going to stop struggling, because I'm never going to be understood by people who are deliberately misunderstanding me. But one of the things that really had been a barrier to me just accepting that I needed to let go was that I don't like giving up. I don't like admitting defeat. You know, that whole never say die attitude. But this, I realize, isn't about giving up. It's not about admitting defeat. It's not about saying die. It's about choosing my own inner peace over this need to win in the conflict. It's about me accepting that I can't let someone else determine my self-worth for me. And I've also spent a lot of time pondering, how forgiveness plays into this, because I'm typically a very forgiving person, but I found, I was just determined to hold on to the fight, hold on to the ill feelings, hold on to the grudge in this situation, because I really thought that it was the only way I was going to keep myself motivated to keep fighting. But I realized that, what, that's not who I am. I thought about something that the Dalai Lama said years ago about how holding a grudge was about drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That is idiotic. Not the quote, but I mean, that series of actions. I mean, why the fuck am I going to do and say things that are going to ultimately give me a tummy ache, and the people that are shitting all over me are just going to keep on going through life without a care in the world? I can stamp my feet. I can say that's not fair, and they are not going to hear me. And feeling bad will become my full-time job. And it was my full-time job for over a month, but screw that. They don't get to take that piece of me, and I'm done volunteering it. So I decided to forgive them. And I'm not excusing them for their horrible actions and words, because the things that were said and done are not excusable. But I'm giving myself the gift of letting go of that resentment, because holding on to it is only hurting me. It's an act of self-love. It's a way that I can free myself from the weight of their judgment and the pain of being misunderstood. Now, I'm not obviously abandoning the truth. I'm still committed to speaking the truth, living the truth, even if it doesn't align with somebody else's version of it. I'm not going to twist myself into something I'm not just to keep other people happy. I'm not going to pretend that I'm something I'm not just for the sake of the peace. I owe it to myself to stand firm in my position. Now, I'm not sharing this because I want to stir the pot. I'm sharing this because I know I'm not alone in having an experience like this. I know many of us have faced situations where we've been unfairly judged, misunderstood, falsely accused, any number of things. My ultimate hope is that in sharing this experience, someone else is going to feel a little less alone in theirs. We can't always control how others see us, but we can choose how to respond. And for me, in this situation, the choice is clear. I'm choosing peace. I'm choosing forgiveness. I'm choosing truth. And I'm choosing to move on with my dignity intact, on to greener pastures, on to people who are going to appreciate me for who I am, for what I offer. It's just time to move on. Anyways, if you got thoughts on this or anything else I've shared, feel free to send me an email, reach out on social media, whatever. I'd like to hear from you. And until next week, my friends, take care of yourselves, take care of each other.